You're listening to Arsenal Pass, a flesh and blood podcast for players by players. And all about strategy, leveling up, and the latest news in the world of Wraith. Welcome to Arsenal Pass.
Hello everyone, welcome back to episode 249 of Arsenal Pass. Hayden here with Pankaj Bhojwani. As always, this week on the pod, we say farewell to Florian. Another hero sails off into the sunset, hits living legend, and we say maybe hello to Pleiades, or let's not get ahead of ourselves, Pankaj, but there's a lot happening in this meta right now, and we're going to break it all down. Road to Nationals, week 3, calling Columbus, lots happening this past weekend.
It's definitely not Pleiades for people who are wondering. Although I have to say, as we go ahead and talk about the meta and talk about Pleiades stuff, I do have some commendations to give to those deck builders on the Pleiades side. I think there were certain things which were quite ingenious, which I hate, definitely, but were quite ingenious, and there's a begrudging respect.
You love fatigue, don't
for
you?
the way they build that deck. Oh yeah, of course. Big fatigue stan out here. My favorite version of New was definitely the fatigue version, not the fun
100%.
version where you actually try and disrupt your opponent.
CYB, one of your favorite cards, printed in the past 2 years. The list goes on. Anyway, this week in Flesh and Blood, Pankaj, you were in Columbus, so tell us about your week, or your weekend in Flesh and Blood, as it were.
Yeah, it started off great. I brought Fang, as I said I would. I went 3-0 in the first 3 rounds. Played 2 Florians and a Gravy, which is kind of the decks I was there to beat. It was Florian and then Gravy and then another Florian. Were fairly straightforward games, and was like, okay, cool, this is why I brought Fang. And then stuff went downhill immediately after that, when lost 3 games in a row. When I started playing... I played a Mario, and then I played an Acilio, and I played another Mario. And of those games, the Acilio game was actually the closest one, which is very, very interesting. And then that was basically my run at the event. I'm still happy with my Fang pick, and I think looking back, I mentioned, I think on the pod, I think Fang is strictly better Kasai, and I think the data post-Columbus definitely reflects that as well. 4 out of 12 Fangs converted to day 2, but only 1 out of 18 Kasais converted. And looking at just the matchup spread, I was like, yeah, Fang was outperforming Kasai in a lot of the relevant matchups. So I was still happy with the pick, didn't manage to get there.
Do you still feel the same about the Marionette matchup? Because you told me...
No, I need to walk that back. Okay. Yeah, I have to walk that
because I was very dubious on that one.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I thought Fang was favored into Marionette from some internal testing. But yes, I disagree with my past self. No, Fang is not favored into Marionette.
Okay.
I unfortunately was wrong on that front.
Hey, wise men can admit when they're wrong, and that is Pankaj Bhojwani, that's for sure.
Yeah, still wasn't upset to bring the hero for the weekend, and was definitely pinning a lot of my hopes on Bird Correia, who also brought it, and I think was maybe the highest placing Fang over the weekend. She was super, super close to making it a top 8 as well. Nice. Was definitely rooting for her.
Cool. My weekend in Flesh and Blood, I played a Road to Nationals, potentially my last Road to Nationals. I'll talk about that in a second. I'm not here in Sydney the next couple of weeks. I'm traveling for a couple of events over the next few weekends, like personal events, so not going to get much of an opportunity to play Flesh and Blood, unfortunately, which I kind of forgot about when I decided to play Slippy for the first 2 weeks, I'll be honest. And also it was just like, there's 5 weeks of Road to Nationals or whatever it is, and I got plenty of time. I can't remember what I said on play on the pod over the past weekend, because you were giving me such a hard time last week about don't say what you're going to play because you'll play something different. So I was like, well, whatever. I don't know what I'm going to play. I played Syndra this past weekend. I think I did mention how much I was enjoying, or where I thought Syndra was in the meta, and I think post the pod recording and also just thinking about the meta this weekend, we spoke about Florian already, and knowing how strong Florian had been after its win in Japan the previous weekend in Akihabara, and knowing going forward that we thought pretty close to living legend. I just was like, people are going to play so much Florian this weekend. It's just guaranteed. And I also thought that people were going to Gravy's still the best deck. I thought people were going to still be playing quite a bit of Marionette. And I was like, I think Syndra is just like the best deck into those 3. If I'm looking for the best matchup spread, so I was like, I'm going to register Syndra, which I was really happy with my choice. Quite enjoyed the list that I ended up playing. I think I'd maybe make a couple of tweaks and changes, but I've played a lot of Syndra over the past season before this as well. So I ended up going 4-2, missing top 8, losing to 2 Verdances, And honestly, like, both the matches felt pretty rough. Like, I think that matchup, I thought the matchup had kind of gotten slightly worse. It might have gotten worse than I thought, to the point where maybe it's like somewhere around like a 60%er for Verdance. I won one die roll, lost one die roll, and the die roll I won felt a lot closer. The die roll I lost, where I got put to go second, felt worse. So I don't know. I also don't know if my list really was, or my sideboard plan was right for Verdance. I played Tunic in my deck.
Okay.
And I played that against my first Verdance opponent, and I don't think that was correct. And then I switched back to Blood's
Blood-Spattered Vest.
Blood-Spattered Vest, thank you. In the second time I played Verdance, but I didn't draw well in the second game either. So I don't know. I would like to revisit. I think I played a really heavy Draconic list, and I played Spreading Flames, which I think Spreading Flames is good right now, but I also think you need the right base to be able to support Spreading Flames, and I don't think I quite got that right. So anyway, I had fun. I really enjoyed playing Syndra. Beat a Gravy, beat a Marionette. No, wait, I didn't play Gravy. Sorry. I beat a Marionette, beat a Florian, beat... I can't remember now. I think maybe... Oh, and a Gravy. I think it was a Gravy. And I can't remember the other deck I beat as well. So a Mirror. I played a Mirror. So...
Ooh, meta decks this time. Very different from your previous RTNs where you were facing like Valda and like Decimated Great Axe Bolton or something.
No, I played against meta decks this time.
Nice.
So yeah, that might be my last Road to Nationals, unfortunately. I think someone was doing the math of like how many. So I haven't qualified for Nationals yet.
Maybe on XP you've played 3 so far.
Yeah, so that was the thing. But last weekend I went home. I dropped immediately and went home because the heat wasn't feeling particularly great. So I didn't play out my event last weekend. So I think I might be 1 or 2 wins short, possibly 3 at worst wins short of qualifying XP. So I might be trying to find a Road to Nationals in New Zealand this weekend or next weekend to hit up. We'll have to see.
Or maybe you have to use one of them PTIs.
That would feel really bad using a PTI to qualify for Nationals. I will say, I think the Road to Nationals, honestly, the turnout from what I've seen has been phenomenal. But one thing I will comment is that making a change to the Road to Nationals season and also having it start first thing in January, a little bit rough, I think, in terms of just timeline of being able to adjust to that change. Like in December or in November, before they made the change, in November, I'm thinking probably going to take it pretty easy through January. I'll be qualified for Nationals automatically through ELO, be fine. And then they make this change, and I'm like, didn't really think about it enough, didn't really factor my time in enough. And by the way, I'm not complaining. I could have made those adjustments, definitely. But I do think starting first week of January, when people are still, holiday mode, those sorts of things, it is tough. So, just an observation.
Yeah, honestly, it's one of those things where I'm like, every sort of system, people will find something to, complain about or be upset about. Like, and I was seeing a take the other day, which isn't a wrong take, by the way, talking about how the XP change definitely favors people who live in areas where there are more RTN events.
For sure.
Like, just straight up, right? There's some people in certain parts of, say, the US, for example, where they have like 2 RTNs in their region, whereas, for example, like in my region, there's like, I don't know, it's like 4 or something like that. I think maybe even more than that, depending how far you want to consider region, right? So obviously, if you're trying to rack up XP over RTN season, it's a lot easier for someone in my region to do it than someone in a more remote part of the US, for example. But I say, so like, that's not a wrong take. Like, that's a totally valid, fair take. At the same time, it's a bit like, I don't know, really going to be upset about the system, which I think on the whole for many people, like a lot of people see it as a positive. Like, it's just one of those cases, right, where it's like every system will have some flaws, every system is going to favor some people more than others, and like how you're supposed to actually fully balance it, I'm not fully certain.
100%. Yeah, it's just forever going to be hard to get it. You're never going to satisfy everyone. That's just the truth. So, makes sense.
Cool. Let's head on to the news then.
Yeah, let's do it. I'll lead the first point on the news, because I was very excited when I woke up on Monday morning to find out that
it's your teammate
Michael Yaska, our world champion, had won the Calling in Columbus on Florian, a man who has been playing a lot of Florian the last few weeks. He's been very dedicated to his craft. I was very excited to register Florian. He said to me, just play Florian at your internationals this weekend. It's just the best deck. And I was like, so many people are going to play it. I don't think I'm going to play it. And he's like, you're just wrong. And he is so right. And congratulations to Michael on a calling win, on a bit of a tear at the moment. Last year, PT top 8 World Championship win, and starts the year off with a calling win. So, see what he does next, I guess.
Wow. Well, thanks for that behind-the-scenes insight, because I have a very different behind-the-scenes experience with Michael Yasker, which was the night before the calling, like Friday evening. I'm just walking around in the venue. I walk by this table. Michael Yasker is practicing against Peter Budenzik, right? We all got in a bit later, so we couldn't join that last side event for the day, so we're just hanging around the venue. And Peter Budenzik is on Auxilio, as I know. He's been practicing in the past few weeks. And look at what our world champ is playing. And this guy is on Lavaya. He went to Ethan, who was in the coverage booth, doing coverage things as he is, the night before the calling. He borrows Ethan's fully blinged out Lavaya deck, brings it out to Peter and says, hey, can I jam some games? I'm considering this for the calling. And I'm watching them play. I'm like, Michael, what are you doing? Why are you even considering Lavaya? So anyway, that was my behind the scenes experience with him. I was very glad that he pivoted to Florian as well.
He's just got to get it out of his system. He's a notorious, he loves Lavaya, even though the deck is unplayable, and he just needs to get out of his system. So I don't blame him. I'm glad that he found an outlet. Shout out to Peter for being the outlet on that one. He's got to get it out of his system so that he doesn't make terrible decisions, like register it for a PT once again. So glad that he got that out.
For those who are curious, they chopped games. They went 1-1 in their practice games at Lavaya Auxilio.
Do you reckon Peter was considering throwing just to see if Michael would actually play Lavaya and give him incentive to play Lavaya?
Honestly, with Peter, I can't tell whether he's throwing or whether he's actually playing the game. So it's difficult.
All right. Anything else in the news?
I say as someone who didn't even day 2 the calling, by the way. Anyway. In the news, Florian LL, thanks to Michael Yasker and a whole bunch of the RTN winners as well. Actually, someone was doing the math. I don't know whether Florian would have LL'd even without the calling win. I'm not entirely sure.
No, it wouldn't have. I did the math already. It would have needed 23 wins, I think, or 22 or 23 wins this past weekend. I think it had 18 or something, 17. So no, it wouldn't have.
Okay. So a big part thanks to Michael Yasker as well, Florian LL this weekend. And that's a big chunk of the news, and we'll definitely talk more about that in the main topic.
Cool. Well, let's get on to the Commander Cookout then. And if you want to get your questions in for the Commander Cookout, as we do each and every week, we answer your questions on the podcast. You can do so by dropping them in the YouTube comments below, letting us know it is a Commander Cookout question. You can email us at arsenalpassfab@gmail.com. You can, if you're a Spotify listener, you can drop it in the Spotify comments, let us know it's a Commander Cookout question. Or you can do what this individual has done, which I'll leave to Pankaj to read this question, but you can give us a handwritten note at an event where you see one of us, for instance, Pankaj Bhojwani at Columbus calling this past weekend, or where you'll see us next. I will be at Brisbane calling. Is Yokohama your next event? You must have a calling before Yokohama, surely. Well, Premier. You'll be at World Premier.
I'll be in London in a few weeks.
Must be nice. Anyway, otherwise, if you're an Arsenal Pass patron, you can drop your question in the patrons Discord. And then, Pankaj, I'm going to hand it over to you because this is a question that was hand-delivered to yourself.
Yeah, so this is given to me by Bryce Platts over the weekend. He came out in between his coverage games and handed me this note during the calling. Shout out Bryce Platts. Every time I see him around these events, I bug him to release more episodes of Cardboard and Beyond. If anyone is not familiar with the podcast, he has a podcast called Cardboard and Beyond, where he goes into deep conversations with various personalities in Flesh and Blood. Would highly recommend you check it out. I'm a big fan of it, and my only complaint is that he doesn't release enough episodes. But of course, they're very high quality, so it makes sense. That takes a bit of time in between. So his question was, I've been thinking a lot about what a TCG team should be, and I'd like your musings on a few topics. In your opinions, what makes a great TCG team leader? What are the interpersonal dynamics that lead to a successful testing season? Do you thrive in a fairly structured environment, or do you prefer something more laissez-faire? That's like a fancy Bryce word. Like more relaxed, I guess, is the name of that. Do you know how to pronounce that word?
Laissez-faire?
Yeah, that. That. Postscript. Would Hayden like to join me on Cardboard and Beyond sometime?
Well, shout out to Bryce. Great to see Bryce on coverage this past weekend and seeing Bryce more on LSS coverage. And if you ever watch the AGE events, Bryce is usually heavily involved with that piece as well from a coverage standpoint. So shout out to Bryce. And yeah, of course, Bryce, I would love to come on the podcast. I have, Pankaj knows I don't consume a lot of content around Flesh and Blood, but I have listened to Cardboard and Beyond. I listened to your Margin Bay episode, thought it was fantastic. So, of course, hit me up. I hope to see you very soon in person, because I don't think I've actually ever met Bryce properly in person. I think we've met in passing once, and that was it. So, great question. I think there's a blueprint out there to a degree from competitive TCGs of the past, and I think it's hard to look past what Teams and Magic the Gathering did, because there was literally incentive to be on teams at certain points through Magic's history. But I think if you want to go into like depth of what that looks like and what that blueprint looks like, and then also I think what the modern TCG team can look like, because of course bearing in mind everything we have at our disposal now. So even if I compare the start of Flesh and Blood to where it is now, we didn't have Talishar 5 years ago, for instance, when teams were first, or quote unquote teams were first forming in Flesh and Blood, or play groups, whatever you want to call it, testing groups. Whereas now it's very different. You can have very global teams a lot easier. Things like Discord, that are so widely adopted now. Teams, people traveling to events and being able to get together in person as well. I think So Bryce asked a great question on this as well. It's like, what makes a great TCG team leader? I actually think is a great question as well. I think it's really, really important that you have a great minimum one leader, but preferably multiple people who can lead within these teams. And I think having, I would call it like a captain or a manager, like someone that can direct a lot of, really this person's job is to keep people on track, because gamers are notorious, TCG gamers particularly, notorious for just being like, I might play Levia, so let's grab some games of Levia instead of doing, worthwhile testing, for instance. So having someone who can really focus a team, say, this is the process we're going to go through. It might be something like 4 weeks before we start testing in this manner, 2 weeks before we test in this way, 1 week before an event we're testing in person. This is what a testing schedule looks like. I'll shout out to what I'm most familiar with right now, which is for instance Tarak Patel and what he's done with the team in these past few events. For the World Champs in particular, they had a really more rigid schedule than they had in the past. They had very clear goals and ambitions with their testing. I think that's so important. I couldn't care less what your goals and ambitions are for the event. It's about the process. So how do you create the best possible process to deliver you the most readied players for the event, and doing it in a manner where you don't get to the last 2 days and you're just rushing to find things out. And I think Tarak did a great job of that, and that's often a downfall of teams. They're not focused early, they're not focused late, and it becomes too late to get focused in the end, and then they're just all over the place. I think Super Armory team, or Super Armory, so they're called the Armory, the Super team, the Armory team, and what they did in the lead up to London. I think they were doing a lot of this, and that was because of the experience that Simon Nielsen had in other TCG teams, for instance. So yeah, I think having a leader, very, very important. I think the interpersonal dynamics is something else that Bryce speaks of here. I personally think that a basis of friends make the best team first and foremost. I think you have to, in general, get along and want to be spending time together. You don't have to be the best of friends, but I think you do have to have some common things and some things that you often you're testing with these people, like for hours on end and in person, and you need to at least like people. So, yeah, I think those are the things I would say. But I think we've spoken a lot about testing process before, so I'd leave it at that and focus more on the team dynamic in this one.
Yeah, on the interpersonal dynamics around the TCG team leader, I have to say, as I was reflecting on this question, I was finding myself struggling to distinguish between a good TCG team leader and just a good leader in general, because I think a lot of the same things apply, right? Good leaders in outside of TCGs often have a lot of the same qualities, which are like patience and making sure everyone has the space to speak, fostering a safe environment where everyone feels comfortable speaking out, being a resource if someone is uncomfortable, unhappy with something. Things like that are all what I think makes a great leader in general, and definitely extends over to the TCG team leader space as well. And from my experience, I like to shout out Yuki, who is our leader on like the Stroopwafel side, and she's been the one who leads and organizes the structure leading up to the major events. And so, for example, before Philadelphia, she's the one saying, okay, like 6-7 weeks out, we're going to start having weekly team meetings, and every team meeting we talk about what we're going to focus on for that week, so, and what people want to start focusing on more. So we started off being like, oh, we should maybe focus a little bit more on LL and stuff, and then as we get closer, focus more on CC stuff, and making sure it's all organized. She also made sure that meetings were recorded, because not everyone could make the meeting that week, for example, and you could still check back on the recording. I definitely did that a couple of times. And just going through like everyone one by one, asking them what they want to focus on that week, just making sure everyone has a space, and providing a level of structure as well to the entire process, which was amazing. And another thing that she really encouraged that we do, which I believe she learned from her stint in the Armory as well. She does give props like Simon Nielsen for like learning this piece from her, which is something we've incorporated in our testing as well, is once we are in the middle of like proper testing season, not like right now, it's kind of just like everyone's like casually like getting games with each other. But when it's more serious testing, everyone also posts a testing report after they're done. So suppose I play a set of games, a set of Verdant Syndra games against someone. I will go ahead and post like my side of what happened in the matches in our like match results part of the Discord. So I'll be like, oh, I went 2-2, I was on the Syndra side, this person was on the Verdant side, and here's what happened in each game, who went first, who went second, here's the things that were unique, here's the things that stood out, here's maybe something we can play towards a little bit more, etc., etc. And that helps a lot for everyone, because then the knowledge is shared, right? And that's the whole point of a team. It's I can figure out, hey, you know what, maybe Out of Dragon Fire is actually really good, and maybe perhaps better than Out of Dragon Scale in this matchup, and not everyone needs to go investigate that individually. It's like everyone can rely on each other's shared knowledge, for example, and that was a practice that was encouraged by Yuki in this sense, and yeah, it's been amazing. So to generalize it to like a good TCG team leader, I mean, yeah, it's kind of what
good
applies to like many leaders, right? Having like incorporating structure and being patient and giving everyone space, making a safe environment that everyone wants to be a part of.
Yeah, having a vision, a personal vision, but also a vision that you can extend to others, and bringing people in and getting them to buy into that vision, I think is what a great leader does. So I'm super passionate about personally just what makes a great leader, just through my outside card gaming adventures, honestly, but through work and my career and things like that. But so I really enjoy talking about what good leadership looks like, but and learning about it and being educated. But I think, you know, you said about the match reports. The other thing that I love about those, I agree, I would really recommend adopting match reports if you're trying to, you know, recreate, you know, or create rather a great TCG team. It also allows for conversation. You know, often I think people will just post. They'll use or numerical things. They'll say, "We played this match. You know, I'm now 11-2 in this matchup," sort of thing. But sometimes the difference between a win and a loss is so minimal. It could be something that small that happens in a game. Someone makes a mistake, or you know, you won the first 9 games, and then someone makes an adaptation in the matchup, and you play 2 more games, but they'd probably win the next 10 now as well. So the qualitative is so much more important than the quantitative in the flesh and blood space with matchups. And I think it also opens up for discussion of like, oh, you found that. Well, a game I played last week, I found this. What's been the change? Oh, hey, I'll reply to you. This has been the change in this matchup from my experience. We found a different way to approach this, or this card is not doing the same thing as it was now because of X, Y, Z in the way that X has changed. So yeah, I love qualitative dialogue when it comes to testing and as a testing team in Flesh and Blood.
Yeah, we definitely had that for sure, where it's like this matchup, we're like, oh, okay, it looks like this hero is winning more than the other hero in this matchup, but then a few weeks later, it's like suddenly it's like reversing, and it's very important to take note that things can change, and don't look at the overall, oh, it's like, I don't know, like 15-5 or whatever, but no, it's like the last 5 games were all won by that one hero that was losing at first.
Yep, 100%. Cool. Well, great question, Bryce. Again, shout out to Bryce and the work that Bryce does in the Flesh and Blood space. If you want to get your questions in for Commander Cookout, please do so. You can drop them in the YouTube comments below. Let us know as a Commander Cookout question. Maybe you want to get them in the Spotify comments as well. Head over to Spotify if you're a listener on the audio platform there. You can email us at arsenalpassfab@gmail.com. You can give us a note, like Bryce did, at a next event, wherever we might be, Yokohama, London, Brisbane. We get around a little bit, so you'll see us. So feel free to come up to us, say hello, and give us a note. We will always make time. Even if we're maybe on a short break between coverage, we'll make sure we come back and have a chat to you. And if you're an Arsenal Pass patron, get in the Discord and drop your question in there. We love questions from everyone. We love all sorts of questions. Another great question this week. Let's get on to the main topic of the pod, Pankaj. This meta keeps evolving, and Florian has just hit a living legend. What does that mean for the next evolution of this meta? Bearing in mind now we have, setting the scene, 2 more weeks of Road to Nationals, and then we head to the world premiere of the Compendium of Wraith, and everything will change once again. So, probably.
Well, hopefully.
Probably. I'm going to say it's going to change. Because even if the set... So, this is something that I think is really interesting. I think we can both agree, Pankaj, that in general, the biggest change-up that has come each and every season of Flesh and Blood has been from Living Legend, heroes attaining Living Legend status, and banned and restricted announcements, not so much set releases. Like, I think that would be the order. It's like Living Legend, banned and restricted, set releases. That's generally been in the past the order of how impactful things have been. For the most part, that's not always been the case, but at the start of a new season.
I think the only exception is new heroes. Like, I think new heroes have had bigger shakeups. Like, I think about 2025, like Hunted releasing adds Syndra.
Sure.
And then Syndra's like a hero release, like change a bunch of stuff. High Seas comes out, and now Gravy is a big part of the metagame. But beyond that, when it comes to like upgrading previous heroes and stuff, yes, I'm with you. It's more about the LLs and the bans.
But even I would point to, for instance, like the Syndra piece. I think Enigma leaving the format and hitting Living Legend shortly after in London, right? Had more impact.
Yeah, although like Syndra did win 2 callings immediately after release, right? Like,
yes, and then people learn how to play against it.
Yeah.
But no, I do agree. I think that the hero releases as part of that, they are impactful. But what I'm getting at is that this format is so wide that I think that, and so many things are happening within it that I think that we're primed for a set to have really big impact, especially a set that is a supplemental set. Because actually, if you look back in the history of Flesh and Blood, supplemental sets going back to Everfest, and we've not had, Dynasty, have had some really big
also
impact.
Dust Till Dawn.
Yeah. But that was, but Dust Till Dawn was only for two heroes, basically. So,
Does you mean like Vincent and Prism? So you're just disregarding Levi and Bolton?
Yeah. Yeah, literally.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. Yeah, okay, fair enough. But yeah, no, we did have like 2 supplemental sets, which kind of didn't do much. But yeah, I do think Pen will shake things up a little bit more. It kind of needs to, right? We had like Super Slam, which didn't do too much.
Yep.
We're not talking about Pleiades. I mean, we will talk about Pleiades, but that doesn't super count. And then we had the Mastery Pack as well, Mastery Pack Guardian, which also didn't do so much. So there's definitely a lot of expectations of Super Slam. But I do, sorry, it's not Super Slam, Compendium. But I do expect those expectations to be met to a fair extent.
Yeah, I might be reaching a little bit on the supplemental sets impact, but I think this format is primed because we've just had so many chops and changes week on week. Things are so close. There's more playable heroes than we've ever had before.
I will note one thing as we're talking about things that have affected the metagame the most. I want to have, with a little asterisk, add armory decks to that list as well. Yeah. Because we had Dash.io Armory deck, which kind of brought that hero into the metagame, and then we had Aurora Armory deck, which kind of turboed her into LL. Gravy Armory deck, which sort of released like with the hero, also had a lot of impact. It's interesting, right? But then we've also had like Azalea Armory deck, which did absolutely nothing. The Bolton Armory deck, Max Armory deck, which did nothing. I do feel like the Armory decks have sort of been very polarizing in that sense, where it's either the impact is insane and the hero is instantly at the top of the metagame, or it did absolutely nothing. I will say though, the most recent one, I guess it helped Katsu. I don't know. I will say the most recent one, the Slippy one, is perhaps maybe where like the balance has been struck the most neatly. I would say, where it did, give Marinette like a couple upgrades, give him the boots. Some of them are running like Meat Madness. And so it's like this is a little bit of a bump, but not like, okay, this hero's now turbo broken from the armory deck.
He's playable.
But yeah, just wanted to add that piece to as we talk about like set releases and like what changes metagames.
I would also argue though that maybe the Slippy deck being more middle of the road in terms of its impact is because of the meta we live in today, not because of the armory deck specifically, personally. But anyway, so that's where we're at. I want to start with... Let's start with the results of the weekend, then let's talk Florian's leaving, departure impact, and if you're playing Road to Nationals these next 2 weekends, what are we sleeving up and why? What are the changes post Florian leaving, and just where does the meta adapt to next? Because we've seen week over week the meta has adapted. So Road to Nationals results this past weekend, Florian, by far and away, most wins, 15% of the wins, 17 wins. Makes sense. You knew people were going to show up because it was probably the last weekend, or likely one of the last 2 weekends people would get to play Florian out there. It was really primed. It just won a calling in Akihabara, and it looked good in the meta. We spoke about this since week one, that we thought it looked good in the meta game. Gravy had a pretty average week the week before, which we'll get to in a second. So it made sense. Acilio and Verdance, the 2 and 3 there. So we spoke last weekend, we're like, it's the rise of Rosetta, and boy were we right. Florian, Acilio, and Verdance, the top 3 heroes this past weekend in terms of win share, 10% each for Acilio and Verdance. Then you get to KO at 10 wins this past weekend, so still hanging in there despite how absolutely dog we think that hero is, or maybe that's changing. And then Arachne Marionette continues to hang in there, 9 wins last weekend. And then it's Dash.io and Gravy Bones. So Gravy Bones was 7th this past weekend in terms of wins. So really big drop off. And then Syndra was 7th, followed by Fang and Kasai. And then you're Prism, and then you're dropping down into the 1s and 2s after that. But yeah, what's that? That's 10, 11 heroes with 5 or more wins this past weekend. So really, apart from Florian, a really kind of flat distribution, which we kind of spoke about thinking was going to be the case. Continues to be the case. What are the ones that stand out for you there, Pankaj? What are the surprises? What are the expected results for you?
Well, the first thing is seeing the top 3 heroes. I instantly felt a sense of validation because we did say last week this is Rosetta meta, which is back in Rosetta meta. You should be playing one of the Rosetta heroes, and then the 3 of them are in the top. The other thing, which as we move and talk about the Calling Columbus metagame, I think it is fascinating to see the difference between RTN level conversion and then calling level conversion, like what's converting to day 2. I'm once again going to just talk about Verdance here and how she just sucks right now. Okay, so like the RTNs, yeah, sure, she's like 3rd most winning. She has 11 wins. In Columbus, 0% conversion. That's like not a meme. Literally 0 Verdances converted to day 2. This was after having a terrible weekend at Akihabara as well, which I think just goes to show like what we were speaking about, right, at the RTN level, and how like maybe players aren't punishing the Earth heroes enough or just playing right into the game plan. I do feel like the data sort of supports that. The other one that's kind of confusing, okay, no, Verdance isn't confusing to me, but what is confusing to me is KO, where I don't know why he's doing so well at the RTN level. Again, at the callings he's doing terribly, but then at the RTN level he's still like kicking up there, which is weird. I feel a little bit validated that Fang did, I guess, same as Kasai. I've been saying for a while, I do think he was like strictly better than Kasai. The Calling Columbus results also showed that. But now with Florian gone, things are going to change. I don't think I can recommend Fang anymore. But yeah, aside from that, nothing too surprising except Gravy continues to underperform at RTN levels. We've also spoken about that before, compared to like the Calling level. Yeah, anything stick out to you?
Yeah, so you spoke about the Verdance one. One thing I'll say on Verdance has really dropped off in terms of representation at the calling level. I mean, it was the like 10th or 11th most played deck this past weekend, I think, in Columbus, right? Like,
same representation as Fang,
yeah,
which is funny.
Yeah, and KO underhanded cheat. So it's like, I think Verdance is, people are just some of the best players, to your point. They're not registering Verdance at the moment, which I think makes sense when you think that, Gravy Bones is one of the best decks in the format. Acilio has been rising. Yeah, Acilio has been rising. Arachne Marionette is also a deck that's going to show up. So none of those are like great for you. Like Marionette is the most favored of those, and it's like 50-50, maybe 55 at best if you've kind of built your deck for it. So, what are you preying on? Kasai and KO. But if you also think that those decks aren't good and don't have great conversion, why are you registering Verdance? So I just don't think the best players are switch that to the Road to Nationals level, like you say, and yeah, I think there's a bit of a way you're playing into it, but also, I also just think that there's a lot of verdants showing up. Honestly, a lot more verdants showing up. This is a bit anecdotal. Like I've just seen a lot of verdants showing up in my locals, and Road to Nationals. But I do think I would put money on it that there's a higher representation of verdants at Road to Nationals than there are at these callings. Honestly, because verdants has just dropped off a cliff in these callings. The other one for me, I think, is I look towards the ones that are converting like for like. Road to Nationals to callings, and I think Acilio is definitely one of those. And the other one is, I think, Marionette. Yeah, Marionette have really good conversion this past weekend as well. So those two to me stand out as two of the best decks in the format right now at any level, and I think that is something that is really worth pointing out. I thought that might be Dash.io, but Dash.io is not necessarily having quite as much success at the calling level. Not terrible, but not amazing. And I thought Syndra would have a better weekend. I thought it was a really, really good pick this weekend, because if I look at these top 6, 7, 8 heroes, if I just say the heroes above Syndra, Gravy Bones, good matchup. Dash.io, bad matchup. Arachne Marionette, I think is a good matchup. KO, Armed and Dangerous, slightly bad matchup. Verdance, I thought it was 50-50. Acilio, good matchup. Florian, good matchup. So maybe with the Verdance piece, has a tougher time at Road to Nationals. And then when you look at the conversion at Columbus this past weekend, it had a fairly poor conversion as well. So I was maybe a little bit surprised about Syndra, but I'm slightly biased.
Yeah, actually, if you remember last week, you asked me who I think would be the best picks for the Calling Columbus weekend, and I had Acilio and Syndra up there.
You did?
So the Syndra piece definitely didn't quite pan out. For various reasons. I think you're right. I didn't quite maybe clock on to the fact that a Verdance matchup got significantly worse for Syndra than it did for Verdance. But now that you've said that, it kind of just makes a lot of sense. Getting online as Verdance didn't really matter, even when Root 1 Carapace was a thing. Like, for that matchup, getting online was a meme. It literally was not really a factor. Whereas Branded Cyniclaw was absolutely a factor on the Syndra side. So it does seem like in that matchup, Syndra got hit way harder.
Also, Wrath Retribution.
So
like,
it makes sense.
Verdance just
Wrath, of course.
I mean, there was Gauntlet, but they had to keep their Gauntlet around, and then they kind of had to make sure they played semi-aggressively to kill you before you could set up a Wrath Retribution. So it was a whole thing. But I just look at so we can move on to the Calling Columbus, right? And at the Calling Columbus, the top 5 most represented decks, and there's quite a big... Arachne Marionette was the most represented. It makes sense to me. And Gravy Bones second. I think 2 of the best decks in the format right now. 38 copies, 33 copies, and then Florian very closely behind at 30. And then you have a bit of a drop-off to Acilio at 23. And those are the top 4. And then once you get to 5, it's tied between Kasai, KO, and Syndra, basically. And then another drop-off after that. And if I'm looking at Syndra there, I'm like, Marionette, Gravy, Florian, Acilio, the top 4 decks, all good for you. So I was surprised that Syndra didn't have a better weekend than it did, especially at the calling level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I agree with you. The spread looks like maybe the hero is just lower power than we are giving it credit for.
Yes.
Especially after Akihabara and seeing players like Gordon Cole make it a top 8. Maybe it's just the raw power level isn't there anymore, and players need to put a lot more into the deck and a lot more reps to actually get the mileage out of it.
I think so. I think there's a lot more to be seen with the right build, I think, as well. There's a lot of tension in the deck right now in terms of how you build it, and it's not clear and straightforward. So yeah, for sure. So I guess Calling Columbus, though, if you compare it to Road to Nationals, I just spoke about the most represented decks there. We can move on to conversion rate as well if you want, but any sort of thoughts on what you saw this past weekend from the representation and conversion?
I'm still not sure why people are bringing KO.
What was KO's conversion?
I don't know. It's terrible.
6%.
18 people brought KO. 18 people brought KO and 1 made it to day 2.
Yeah.
And same for Kasai. 18 people brought Kasai and 1 made it for day 2. And I was saying for a while, I was like, I don't see the Kasai angle, especially when Fang is right there and has a better matchup spread. Given that Florian was obviously going to be a big part of the metagame, and much rather be on Fang. Kasai and KO, people showed up, didn't do so well. I guess the not doing so well didn't surprise me, but them showing up on those heroes did surprise me.
I have a question for you. So, best 2 conversion rates this past weekend of the more represented heroes. So, I'm not talking about Bolton, who had one copy, registered 1 copy day 2. Marionette.
It was Decimator Great Axe, by the way.
It
It wasn't even Raiden or Sabers.
Arachne Marionette, 42% conversion rate on the weekend. Acilio, 43% conversion rate on the weekend. And then you look at Gravy, 35, Fang, 33, Pleiades, 38. We can take that one offline in terms of the Pleiades piece. But is Acilio better than Gravy right now? Is my question.
Better than Gravy? I think so. Okay. Okay. I want to maybe ask a question back to you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to propose that we are entering a metagame with a clear triangle. I would say this past meta has been a lot more open.
Okay.
I think we have a clear triangle now with Florian gone. I think the triangle is Acilio, Marinette, Gravy.
Yeah, okay. So
with Marinette beating Acilio, Acilio beating Gravy, Gravy beating Marinette. I think these three decks are above the curve in power level compared to everyone else now. That they are in a tier of their own, and they have a natural sort of counter matchup between the three of them. Being one of them is favored into, like, for each one of them, the other is like favored, and then the other is like unfavored.
Okay.
And power level wise, they're all up there. So to answer your question, is Acilio better than Gravy? I mean, I think they're both points of the triangle, and maybe, I suppose, objectively, yeah, Acilio's maybe a slightly higher power level than Gravy, but Gravy just answers a very different part of the metagame, right? If you're asking me to play into Marinette, it's like, yeah, I think Gravy, you'd rather be on Gravy than Acilio if you're trying to face down a Marinette.
So let me extend the question then. Let's keep digging deeper on these layers to, I guess, give our listeners a bit of an understanding of where we see the meta right now. If you think those three are a bit of a triangle, that would tell me you think they're the three best decks in the format right now then? Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
Okay. So
yes.
What do you think the next three best decks in the format are? It doesn't have to be perfect, but just, what you think are probably the next best three decks in the format, just from a power level or...
I'm not sure if there's three, so I'm not sure if it's gonna be like 3-3, like a perfect split like that.
That's
but I
fine.
can like talk about a few.
Well,
decks.
let's look at representation as well. Like,
yeah.
I mean, is it Kasai?
I think with Kasai, so with Florian being gone now, I think Kasai is a much more valid pick, like compared to Fang. So yeah, I'll put Kasai in like the conversation for like the next tier below like Marinette, Acilio, Gravy. Like Kasai is up there because she has a very solid Gravy matchup, and interestingly enough, it's like she actually still plays the game into like Acilios and Marios. Her data into Acilio, especially over the weekend, was like surprisingly like decent. I mean, you have to put bells in your list. You have to respect the Acilio and play the bells. But it turns out she can actually put on the pressure to like take down the Acilio. Mario is a little rough, but you still play the game. So Kasai is in that tier as well. I want to put Prism in that tier. Honestly,
keeps trying, doesn't he?
Because I think she. Sorry?
I said you keep trying to spread the Prism propaganda.
It's not even like I play the deck or like I like very like it or something, but I do think it depends how much they respect her, right? Like similarly, if the Marios have poppers and stuff, then sure it gets tough. But otherwise, I feel like in theory, it's like she does have a solid Gravy and Marinette matchup, and I believe the Acilio game is like a game to be played. These two stick out to me. Oh, Dash.io.
Yeah,
Dash.io
that's
also
what I was waiting
out.
for.
Yeah. Dash.io beats Acilio. I think you're decent to Gravy. Marinette's a little rough, but you have so much of a fridge that you sort of need to ask them to like disrupt you like a few times on critical turns. Otherwise, you can also beat them as well. So Dash.io. Honestly, Dash.io might be the triangle breaker, if you will. Where it's like she might not just be the tier below. She might straight up just be the thing that disrupts this triangle and maybe makes it not a triangle anymore.
Okay. So how Verdance and Acilio, how bad is that matchup for Verdance, do you think?
I know you hate numbers. Here's the thing: if the Verdance is playing bells, if she's playing Amulets of Echoes to respect the Acilio, she gets to play the game. I do feel like a lot of Acilio matchups do come like when the other side is like a bit of a slower deck, so like the Kasai or the Verdance, whatever. It does come down to whether they'd find the Amulet of Echoes and put it into play. So the games where Verdance finds them, it is very much a game to be played. I still think Acilio is favored on that side, even if the Verdance has bells. I'll put it like maybe around 40 for Verdance.
Okay.
Does that track with perhaps your?
Yeah, I don't know. Honestly, I was keen to hear your thoughts. I was gonna also check out what our friends at Fab Blazing had to say about the matchup. I was trying to find Acilio versus Verdance, and it looks actually pretty close to 50-50, so I wasn't sure. I guess the reason I'm asking is I'm trying to work out where Verdant sits, because I agree with you. I think there's a top 3 right now of Arachne, Gravy, Acilio post Florian leaving, and then I think the next best I thought was probably Kasai, Dash.io. Then I was like, is it Syndra and Verdance? But where is Verdance sitting in there? Does Verdance want to play against many of these heroes? And yeah, maybe it wants to play against Syndra and Dash.io, and if they're rising, maybe that's good for Verdance. And if the Celia matchup's not terrible, okay, Marionette matchup's not terrible, maybe Verdance and Kasai is good for you. And if Kasai is rising, great, Verdance comes back into the spread of things. I think for me, those are the 7 I would say, and then I'm looking at the KOs of the world. I'm looking at the Prisms personally in that next block. That's where I'm at anyway. I guess. Mm-hmm. So if we've got this view of, sounds like we both agree on, Dash.io and Kasai being in and around that next sort of after the triangle. Thinking about the things we just spoke about, which of these, let's go both ways. Which of the heroes in the top 3 do you think have the best kind of wider matchup spread? Thinking about some of these next best or best of the rest decks. And then which hero of the best of the rest do you think has the best matchups into the top 3? So basically, if you're going to pick one of the best 3 decks in the format right now, which one should you pick and why because of its matchup spread against the rest of the field? And if you're going to pick something outside of the top 3, which deck are you looking at because of its matchup into the top 3 decks? I think that's the question I would ask right now. 2 questions, and I think hopefully that's clear enough.
I think before the weekend, my answer to that first question would have been Marionette, because I do think they just have a very high ceiling. I think there's lots of matchups where if they draw correctly, they kind of just get there, including Gravy. Mm-hmm. After the weekend, I think my answer has changed to Acilio, just because that deck, there's just no like proper true disruptive deck in the format right now. Like Marionette is like hardly that. Marionette's honestly kind of an aggro deck, and it has like some little elements of disruption. And similar to like the ceilings, like I just spoke about how Marionette has a ceiling where certain draws feels quite unbeatable. Acilio has that, but like magnified even higher. On top of that, with like the evasive damage and also the killing in your turn sometimes. So you aren't actually at 40 when you play against an Acilio as well, as you get down to that lethal shock ranges. Mm-hmm. He also puts pressure on your equipment, just like how a Runeblade would, where it's like you do want armor against him because he does send a lot of physical, but then he also sends a lot of this tall arcane. So one way or the other, you're like missing out on your equipment. He sort of puts that pressure on you. Mm-hmm. I do want to caveat this with a note, which is, this is of course after my experience seeing Acilio being played this past weekend, but I will point out, and something that was very interesting, is that at Columbus, a lot of strong players were on Acilio.
True,
I think if you, and I do think that when you look at the data, like the Fab Blazing data, which by the way has Acilio having a 60% win rate at Columbus, which is absolutely wild, like the next highest being like 53 or something by Gravy or something. I do think you sort of need to correct for that, given how many strong players chose to bring this deck. I'm talking like Michael Hamilton, Michael Fung, Margin Bay, Peter Budensek, obviously. Just a whole bunch of these players were on Acilio. So maybe my take on the deck is being clouded a little bit by seeing that deck being piloted at like such a high level, compared to the average skill level of the other heroes being piloted. But I do feel like Acilio, I don't know, it just feels like even in his unfavored matchups, like the Mario or whatever, or even the Syndra, I don't know, they can just pull the win out of the hat. He's very Kano-esque in that sense as well. And I do feel that way when I practice against him as well. Like Kano had that feeling when I practice against Kano, and sometimes I'm like, I'm not sure if I'm learning anything. Like, I've put a couple of hate cards in, but it just sort of just feels like what happens on the other side. And it does feel like many games against Acilio, I feel that way too. It's like, turn 2, they found a Gon and Flash Giga combo. Like, okay, cool, I just died. Or like 5 turns and they've just been drawing bricks and then they just fell over. So I'm kind of like, okay. But I do feel like the good Acilios navigate the bad side of variance on the deck very well, to the point where I do think he might be... Yeah, to answer your question in a very long-winded fashion, of the 3 in the triangle, I think Acilio might be the pick.
And it sounds like just because of power level at this point in time, honestly, rather than necessarily the matchup against the rest of the field per se, like it sounds like you think it's just so powerful right now as well. Like it's hard to disrupt in the right hands.
I don't think it's hard to disrupt. It's that the disruptive decks are just absent.
Sure.
Okay. It's kind of that, Yeah. I do feel that there's a point of this metagame being very it's not really like value grindy based. I struggle to call it that, but it does feel like a lot of, I guess, sort of like vanilla damage, but like high points of damage. Like even like Gravy to some extent, it is a lot of value, but it's kind of vanilla. Like he has a few disruptive pieces like Luther Hold and Conqueror, but like not a lot. Most of the time the disruption is the form of like these allies that you suddenly just sink more damage into them. Yeah. But like when the game goes like 3 turns because against Cecilio, that doesn't really matter. Marinette, as I spoke, doesn't have a lot of disruption. I feel like if the metagame was like, I don't know, if there was like New, for example, with like that level of disruption, or some ice, or if Marlin was good, I think Cecilio would struggle, or like Azuri, but which is not in the metagame, so Cecilio just gets like free reign.
Yep, that makes sense. I think it's so interesting. You said before the weekend you would have said Marinette, after the weekend Acilio. I'm actually the opposite. I think heading into this weekend I would have said Acilio because Florian was also around. And now that Florian leaves, I think Acilio in theory is a bit of a loser out of this past weekend. I think we'll wrap up on winners and losers post this this Living Legend. But I think Acilio, people they're just working out the more consistency with it. It's powerful. It's raw power, and the meta is just kind of primed for that raw power, I think, right now. So I do think Acilio gets a bit of a knock after the weekend, but it's still so powerful. I think what's really interesting is look at traditional, to your point, 187 matches with Acilio over this past weekend at the Call in Columbus. And yes, this is just one event, so you shouldn't read everything into these matchup win rates. But traditionally, Syndra, bad matchup for you. Acilio had a 70% win rate into Syndra this past weekend. Traditionally, Marinette, is, I think, closer but unfavored matchup, had a near 60% win rate this past weekend. So Syndra is maybe turning around some of its bad matchups. Plus, it just has great matchups into Kasai and KO and Gravy, for instance. So I think actually maybe KO should be one of the tougher matchups at the moment, but it doesn't look like it is. So they have more on hits than they used to. So I agree. I think Acilio is just really, really powerful, and it's clearly in that top 3, if not one of the best decks in the format right now.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. In theory, I do agree with you. In theory, Florian leaving should be worse for Acilio because that's a good matchup that he lost. But on the flip side, it's not like Florian was keeping down a deck that is Acilio's Predator, right? Because we've seen that happen in the past. So it's like a hero leaving is like bad because then the Predator can actually come out to play now. Like say like when Enigma LL or something. It's like, oh, okay, now it's like you can actually have the Predator to a certain deck come back out. But then that isn't really the case because it's not like Florian leaving opens up the way for like, I don't know, Marlin to come in and like beat up Acilio or something because the disruptive decks were already unplayable.
That's true, but it does.
Acilio loses a good matchup, but it's not like it gained any bad matchups, right?
Well, I do think that Prism becomes more playable and Dash.io become a bit more playable with Florian leaving, and I don't think either of those are great matchups for Acilio.
True, that's fair.
So
Dash.io is a big one, yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know. I think in theory Acilio should be worse this weekend, and to your point, when it's not in the hands of some of the best players, I think you just maybe be careful about your decision to play Acilio this coming weekend, especially when everyone's packing amulets. And they definitely will after the weekend. So you have to be very clear on how you want to play around amulets and things like that. I think my pick, thinking about the best of the rest now, I think my pick would actually be Arachne Marinette of those top 3, and that's actually what I'm potentially looking at if I was going to play Rotation this weekend. I think that's maybe what I would play, especially of those top 3 decks. If I wasn't going to play something outside of that, because I think of those next of the best of the rest, as I kind of said, I think your Dash.io matchup is good. Your Verdance matchup is 50-50 to somewhere around 45-55, whatever you want to call it. Your Kasai matchup is good as well. So I think I would be on the Marinette train personally.
That makes sense.
Best of the rest, though. Where are you at on?
Yes. Why don't you start us off on this one?
I'm at Syndra. I think I'm a Syndra guy. I think that's the reason I chose to play player this past weekend, because I think you have, of the quote-unquote other decks in the format that I think are strong and viable, the best matchup into those top 3 here. I mean, I think losing Florian is slightly worse for Syndra, but in theory, Gravy Bone's good for you. Maybe I need to revisit the Acilio matchup. Maybe something has changed there as well. Arachne Marinette is a pretty close matchup. I mean, the problem is if Kasai is rising, Syndra does get worse. But what do you think?
I think it's Dash.io.
Yeah, I think you might be right.
I mentioned it earlier.
actually.
I think Dash IO is that triangle breaker, has a solid matchup into Acilio. The Gravy one is interesting. I do feel like the Gravy one sort of changes as the pilot's skill level change. Obviously, Gravy in the conversation, that's always a factor. But I did feel for a while that at the higher level, I kept seeing Gravies beat Dash IOs always. But I think that was a large part because in general, the Gravy players were on an average like higher skill level than Dash IOs. But as maybe better players are picking up Dash IO as well, I do feel like perhaps it's shifting back into a Dash IO's favor, but still not by a lot. It's not near like what Syndra is good into Gravy, for example. It's still maybe like a 55 if I have to put a number to it. Still slightly positive for Dash IO, but that is assuming the Dash IO is extremely skilled. And then the Marinette thing, you have a big fridge. You can try and raise them down. They don't block very well a lot of their hands. And I feel like you can get there off of the fridge. So for me, Dash IO is there. I do have another one, which is not a hero you've mentioned at all, but did make top 8 at Columbus, and that's Katsu. Shout out Neotran for making top 8 on Katsu. I do feel like, I've been talking a little bit about how disruption is just kind of absent in this format. Yeah. It does feel like there's quite a little bit of solitaire going on both sides. Even Marinette is just quote unquote the closest thing to disruptive deck we have right now. Just want to keep full 4 or 5 card hands to do their thing.
Yeah.
Like they want to do like Saver, Upstick, send Kiss of Death at you and follow that up with like a Codex or something. Gravy obviously wants to keep big hands, so does Acilio. I think in this sort of solitaire sort of meta, Katsu is I think a pretty sick call and does get a big win from Florian leaving.
Okay. I can see it. Maybe. I don't know. Maybe I can see it. I want to make sure we can...
I think it's a similar angle to Syndra, is basically what I'd say about it.
Yeah, okay. Interesting. Worst deck, though. I would argue.
Fair enough. It's a spicy pick, yeah.
I want to make sure that we can have a bit of a final conversation here on Pleiades, because 2 in top 8 kind of took the event by storm, right? People are going to be like, how the have you guys spoken for an hour almost and not spoken about this deck? Because surely it's the talk of the event, and I want to hear your thoughts, Pankaj. Like, how good is this hero real? Is this deck real, or was this a lightning in a bottle, catching people off guard piece, in your opinion?
I hate to take a cop-out answer, but I do feel like there's elements of both going on. In a sense where, like say the previous metagames, we had Jarl as like the fatigue deck of the format, where it's like, he's like there, people will like have a game plan for him. So in a sense where he like has a presence, but he can maybe catch people off guard. I think that's kind of what happened with Pleiades this past weekend. A lot of people... You see Pleiades, you're like expecting like the aura, like the way she was intended to be played in a sense. You're expecting the suspense aura thing with Moment Maker or whatever. And it turns out she's fatiguing you. And then also even once it got out that a lot of the Pleiades are around and fatiguing you, I do feel like for a lot of players, they just needed like 1 or 2 games into it and then realize what the deck's about, how it fatigues you, and then just never lose to it again. And I feel like I can point to literal examples that happened over the weekend. Margin in the Swiss played against a Pleiades, lost to it, and then played against another one later on the Swiss and like beat it, no problem. And then played it again in the top 8 and then beat it, no problem. Michael Yasker faced one in the Swiss, lost, played it again in the Swiss, beat it, and I don't think he played in top 8, but like it was a sort of, I think he played it twice in the Swiss and won both times. No, he played in top 8. Something.
He played against first round top 8.
Oh, he did play in top 8. Yeah, okay, yeah. Yeah, and then beat it, no problem. I do feel like there's an element of, okay, you need to play against a deck for a little bit because it does fatigue in a bit of a different way, which I think is very, very interesting. It's not a sort of fatigue that we've seen before. Previously in the past, you were just like damage compression is the name of the game, right? And then you can be the fatigue deck. But this deck sort of does ask you for damage compression while also asking you to retain as much value per card in your deck, which is kind of what fatigue does. But you can't always use the same tools against it. It's pretty interesting. But it's the sort of thing where you just had to play against it like once, understand it, and then after that, you should be fine. As long as the deck has the tools to beat it, right? Yeah. Like I think something like Fang, for example, just simply I don't think has the tools like beat that, so that'll probably just like kind of always lose.
Marionette might be
if your deck's like Florian, maybe. But like the Florians and the Acilios, if your deck has the tools and you know how the fatigue deck works, you lose against it once, you shouldn't lose to it again. So I do feel like surprise deck for the past weekend. Will it hang around? Possibly, like in the same way like Fatigue Jarl hung around. Will it be a big player? I'm doubtful. I think now that it's out, people will start getting reps into it and then probably be fine.
Something about US callings and people doing skill check fatigue checks. I look shout out to the two. I assume they're friends that bought the list and we're both 7-0 at the end of day one. What a friggin' achievement! Like, it's awesome. And I think so good to do something atypical and catch people off guard. And I think there is more to it than people maybe think. Right, and Righteous Cleansing is a very powerful card, and being able to recur that effect. I'm with you. I'm kind of both. I think there's something to it to a degree where I think that strategy right now is relevant in the format, and there's some decks that just simply can't overcome it, and there's some decks that can overcome it if they have the right tools, and then there's some decks that can just naturally overcome it, I think, especially once they understand the game plan. So I think it's an interesting spot. It wouldn't be one I recommend personally, but also maybe there's something there and there's more refining that can happen with these Pleiades lists, and actually it can kick on to be a real contender. Won't hold my breath on that one, but we'll see. I think just congratulations though to the two on top 8. It's fantastic.
If we agree on the upper level triangle being a Cilio Gravy Marinette, I mean the fatigue deck doesn't look very good into it, right? Like skilled gravies and skilled Acilios should beat you. So again, it's sort of what you alluded to, where you're just skill checking your opponents, and maybe sometimes it's enough. But now that it's out there and now people can get reps into it, I do feel like it loses quite a bit of equity. But I do want to expand on the congratulations that you were giving to them, and I did talk about this at the top of the pod as well. I do think certain elements of the deck building was honestly very creative and very ingenious in a very begrudging respect sort of way. Like to look at Up on a Pedestal and think of that as like a blue remembrance, whereas one card that converts to 2 back in your deck, I think is just a unique perspective that I never caught until I saw it in action like this. And I was like, wait, that's kind of nuts. And then I think the one that really sort of surprised me was the fact that it's still playing in the palm of the hand. And I was like, wait, isn't in the palm of the hand for you to like set up a big like offensive push with like a 5-card hand? Like, why does your fatigue deck want this? And it turns out it's so because Pleiades' ability is an instant, you can crack it on their turn and have an extra card to block with. And I thought that was just, again, it's the thanks I hate it sort of thing, where it's just like, okay, that is really smart, but also, dude, I hate you for this, that you brought this up. Where like, because it goes back to what I was talking about, right? Against fatigue, you want to like have damage compression, but if they have in the palm of their hand out, it kind of counters your damage compression because they have like now added block compression on their side of the table. So I just thought that alongside the whole Miller's Grindstone piece of it as well was just very intelligent deck building for a strategy. So I do want to commend them for that as much as I hate it.
I also like that it turbos them towards their potential end game of the Righteous Cleansing. If the Righteous Cleansing line is good in that particular matchup and the opponent can't really stop it well, of recurring that Righteous Cleansing as well. Yeah, I think very smart.
We should shout out the names. Damon Riggins, I believe, is the one who maybe pioneered that,
Sure.
and then the other one who made top 8 was Thomas Averett.
Okay,
Averett.
I'm glad you. Yeah, I couldn't quite remember the names of the players, so thank you. Yeah, shout out to Damien.
The graphic is up on, but yeah.
Oh yes, I was on notes. Thank you. Yes, shout out to Damien and Thomas. Yeah. Anything else you wanna cover? Do you want to quickly list off winners losers for the past weekend? We kind of spoke to this briefly. Do you want to just rattle off your winners and losers from Florian hitting Living Legend?
Yeah. So winners, Kasai is a big one. Dash.io is a big one. I'll put Prism up there. I guess Mario is also one. And then for losers, Gravy-ish, because Florian was a good matchup for it. Fang is definitely losing now. Now I do think you should just go back to playing Kasai. But Fang had a nice little, small little upswing for a little bit.
Yep. I think winners for me, I think Marionette's actually a really big winner, honestly, because I think that I was a bit worried about where Marionette was going to shake out. I was like, oh, I thought this was really powerful, but it's kind of fading away, and I actually think it's going to have a really good weekend this weekend. I think Prism is a winner for sure. Dasho for sure. Kasai for sure. Losers, I'd say Syndra actually. I think Syndra had this golden window this past weekend, and it's probably gone, and it wasn't able to capitalize. A few Road to Nationals wins, I think 5 or 6. But yeah, I think that's probably where I'm at right now. Last question, Pankaj, before we wrap up the podcast is, will another hero, living legend, in this Road to National season before we get to Compendium? KO is at 912. Prism is at 851. Those are the realities. Verdance is at 792, so it's too far away. So are KO or Prism LLing this format?
I like how you just skipped over Fi, who was at 813.
Sure did.
Like, not even giving the guy the light of day. He did get absolutely destroyed by the Brandwidth in the club ban, to be fair. I don't think Prism's allowing. KO, we have 2 more weekends of RTNs, I think. Dude, this hero is so confusing to me. I don't get how he still puts up results. It's so, I don't know. Maybe it's just the people who like got lucky with the scabs on those days. I'm gonna go with no, because I just don't believe in this hero at all.
I think in theory it'll finish around 960 KO, unless
that's more realistic to me.
Yeah, that's 20 wins over the next 2 weeks, basically. Gets you to 9 there or thereabouts. That's what I think will be, yeah, I think it's going to get close, but it's not going to hit LL.
That sounds about right.
Cool. Anything else? I guess...
Is he at the 2x 1.5x multiplier at this point? He should be, right? I think it's been 2 years since...
Not yet, right? Late January? Oh, maybe?
I'm looking at... Oh, no. Heavy Hitters came out February 2nd.
February 2nd, that's right. Yep.
So, so it's just when RTN ends, then he gets 1.5x.
Correct. If you're playing an RTN this weekend, or you're playing a calling, Pankaj, what are you playing and why?
Oh boy. If I could play Acilio... Actually, that being said, Battlehardened Portland is actually this weekend. I haven't decided yet if I'm going. Mostly because I don't know what I'm going to be playing. And whether I'll have fun playing it. Let's see. So if I could play Acilio, that would be my pick. I think Marinette's just a strong default. I think if you know how to play Gravy, like literally the 3 in the triangle that we mentioned, if you can play any of those, I think those would be solid picks. For me personally, I think what I'm considering for Portland, if I end up going, Kasai is there, and so is Katsu. I would say these 2. I think at this point, I'm even going to remove Verdance from my back pocket. I've been saying for weeks use my back pocket, but now I kind of just want to not even have it there anymore. Katsu or Kasai, it looks like. But I'm also not too keen on those either. What would you be playing?
Slippy, I think... No, I'm kidding. I think Slippy is fine. But Marionette, I think Marionette is
Marionette makes so much sense.
Really well positioned. I would give a shout out to Dasho. I like Dasho back on the menu after Florian hitting Living Legend as well. So, yep.
Back to your mechanologist roots. Ayo.
Well, I also think that people... I'm not a mechanologist roots person, and Dasho is not a deck that I particularly enjoy, but I think it's fine.
I know. I just wanted to make you say that. You always say, I'm not a mechanologist. I've registered Dasho once. The whole rant.
I think IO is maybe like a really, really good pick for this weekend, because I think surely some Prisms come out of the woodwork after Florian hitting LL as well, and that matchup is laughable, I think, for Dasho.
Yeah. I was wondering why it was that bad for Prism, and then Yuki explained it to me. Yuki did bring Dash IO to Columbus this past weekend, made top 16 with it, was very close to top 8, and she was like, yeah, you pop them max V, you pop with max V, so they can't do anything about it, they can't minus it, right? Enough, and you put a backup protocol on the field, and you just look at them.
Yep. Your turn. Yes, it's very very funny. I genuinely think Dasho is I just want to double down, because I also think that Acilio is, people are going to be picking up Acilio. So if you're Road to Nationals level, you're going to be able to take advantage of people brand new on Acilio, people who play Acilio anyway, just picking it up. Like, I think very, very likely if you head to Road to Nationals this weekend, you're going to see an uptick of Acilio, you're going to see an uptick of Prism, and I think those are good things for you. You might even see an uptick of maybe Gravy this weekend. Probably not. You're probably just going to see the same mount you've been seeing the last few weeks. But I think Dasho could be the pick. The only thing that might hurt you is an uptick in KO, I guess. I don't know.
Sounds like a good Katsu angle, if you ask me.
Yeah. I didn't, but. All right, Pankaj. I think that is going to do it for episode 249 of Arsenal Pass. We are nearing the 250 mark. We are nearing 5 years of Arsenal Pass in 10 episodes, Pankaj, not an 8. If you know, you know. I want to say a massive shout out and thank you to all the Arsenal Pass patrons. Congratulations again to a friend of the pod, Michael Yazka, on a calling win this past weekend, and to friends of ours on top 8s as well. So shout out to everyone who did so well this past weekend. Good luck to all those playing Road to Nationals. 2 more weeks left. Good luck in seeking your qualifications. I'm one of them. So you might see me around at a Road to Nationals this weekend. Pankaj, any last words?
Yeah, good luck to everyone playing RTNs, unless you're playing the Fatigue Pleiades deck, in which case I hope you burn in hell.
Good morning to everyone except Pleiades players. That has been episode 249.
Fatigue Pleiades specifically.
Sure.
If you're playing like regular one to kill you with Suspense Pleiades, that's fine.
Yeah. Screw Fiddler's Green. Until next week, we'll see everyone in the next episode.